Welcome to the Haunted Hour. Tonight, the rain isn't just water. It carries whispers, shadows, things that shouldn't exist. The storm hides something. Something that's watching you, listening, waiting. Turn off the lights, lock the doors, and if you hear a knock, don't answer. Because once you let it in, it never leaves. The nightmare begins now. Whispers in the rain. Chapter 1. The storm begins. The night had been unyielding. Heavy rain cascaded against the windows of a forgotten cabin deep in the woods near Hollow Creek. Daniel, seeking solace from a life in chaos, had chosen this isolated retreat for its promise of peace. But as midnight approached, the storm grew more violent, its fury matching the turmoil in his soul. Inside the cabin, the power sputtered and died. In the oppressive silence that followed, Daniel grabbed his flashlight and sat rigidly in the gloom. The rhythmic pounding of rain on the roof became a sinister metronome to his rising unease. Then, in that relentless downpour, he heard it, a barely audible whisper coming from the darkened hallway. It wasn't the wind. It was something else. Chapter 2. The Silent Visitor. With a heart pounding like distant thunder, Daniel ventured toward the sound. Every step on the creaking wooden floor felt weighted with dread. In the murky corridor, he discovered wet footprints leading to the back door. The door was bolted, yet the prints extended from the forest right up to it, clearly made by bare human feet. As he knelt to examine them, the sound of the rain seemed to fade into an eerie silence. Then came a soft, deliberate creak behind him, spinning around, flashlight beams shaking in his grip. Daniel saw only a shifting mass of dark silhouettes. A whisper, almost drowned out by the storm, hissed, "You shouldn't be here." Frozen in terror, Daniel struggled to steady himself. The voice was neither male nor female. It was a sound of despair itself. Chapter 3. The Haunting Memories. In the following hours, Daniel's isolation grew palpable. The cabin's corners became alive with half-glimpsed movements. He discovered an old leather-bound journal hidden beneath a loose floorboard. The journal belonged to a woman named Emily, who had once inhabited the cabin. Her desperate scrawl detailed strange happenings, a curse that preyed on the lonely, driving them into madness. Emily had written of a ritual, performed on a stormy night, intended to ward off a malevolent spirit. Instead, it bound the spirit to the cabin, trapping its victims in an endless cycle of fear. As Daniel read her final, trembling lines, "It feeds on our guilt, on our secrets. It knows our every regret." The room seemed to shudder with a presence that was both ancient and unforgiving. Chapter 4. The Intruder in the Shadows. The storm deepened. With each flash of lightning, Daniel caught sight of a figure standing at the far end of the hallway, a spectral silhouette whose features were swallowed by darkness. At one point, as he dared to approach, the figure vanished like mist. Yet, every time the lights flickered, it reappeared closer than before. In a moment of desperation, Daniel shouted, "Who are you? What do you want?" Only the rain answered, but then came a response from the very walls, a voice layered with sorrow and malice. "I am the echo of your sins, the keeper of your secrets." That night, the cabin was no longer just a shelter from the storm. It had become a labyrinth of shifting shadows, where every sound was a threat and every silence was filled with dread. Chapter 5. The Reign of Secrets. Unable to endure the oppressive confinement, Daniel decided to step outside. The rain was now a torrential downpour that blurred the boundaries between earth and sky. Outside, the world was transformed into an endless sea of silver, with only the sound of his own footsteps and the soft, haunting murmur of voices that seemed to emanate from the storm itself. Near the edge of the property, Daniel found an abandoned car, its windows fogged over with condensation. On the ground beside it lay strange symbols scorched into the earth. runes that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. As he traced them with trembling fingers, a dreadful realization struck him. These marks were part of a ritual, one that had been attempted before, long before his arrival. And with that realization came another. The wet footprints were not random. They were a path, a breadcrumb trail, leading back to a secret buried in the heart of the woods. The footprints were the evidence of those who had tried to escape this curse cycle, only to be pulled back into its vortex. Chapter 6. The Haunting Past. In the safety of the dim light inside, Daniel pored over Emily's journal again. The entries detailed a man, a shadowy figure who had come to the cabin with promises of salvation, but instead had unleashed something terrible. Emily's writings grew frantic as she described how the man's arrival had coincided with the resurgence of the curse. Daniel's own memories began to blur with the journal's grim narrative. He recalled fleeting images of a man he once knew, a face marred by guilt and regret. Was it possible that Daniel himself was intertwined with the cabin's dark history? Could it have been that man, long ago lost his own sins, now doomed to return? The line between past and present blurred further when he discovered a faded photograph tucked in the journal's final pages. A picture of himself, or a man who looked eerily like him, standing beside Emily in front of the very cabin he now occupied. Chapter 7. Descent into Madness. As the storm raged on, Daniel's grasp on reality began to fray. The cabin turned into a distorted mirror of his inner torment. He heard his name whispered in the echo of dripping water and saw fleeting images of a life he no longer recognized. In one moment, he was Daniel, the man seeking refuge. In the next, he was a ghostly figure tormented by past misdeeds. Each new whisper carried an accusation. You belong here. You are one of us. Shadows danced in corners, whispering secrets of guilt and loss. Daniel tried to flee the spiraling corridors of his own mind, but the mansion-like cabin seemed to stretch into an endless maze. One particularly harrowing moment found him trapped in a room with walls covered in cryptic symbols, runes that glowed faintly under the intermittent lightning. As he traced the lines, his fingertips burned with the same cold intensity that he felt in his heart. It was as though the cabin itself was writing his fate, each mark a testament to his hidden sins. Chapter 8. The Confrontation. In a climactic crescendo of fear, Daniel finally faced the source of the haunting. In the very center of the cabin's main room, under a shaft of moonlight piercing through a broken window, stood the spectral figure. No longer a vague silhouette, it now took on a horrifying clarity, a mirror image of Daniel, twisted by regret and despair. The entity spoke in a voice that was both Daniel's and entirely alien. You ran from yourself. You tried to escape the sins of your past, but they have always been here, bound to you like the rain to the earth. In that moment, the truth shattered the fragile barrier between memory and nightmare. Daniel recalled a life he had long suppressed, a night of unspeakable horror, a decision that had cost lives, a secret buried beneath layers of denial. The spirit was not an external demon, but a manifestation of his own guilt, awakened by the storm and bound by the curse of the cabin. Chapter 9. Breaking the Cycle. Determined to reclaim his shattered soul, Daniel resolved to break the cycle. Guided by Emily's desperate notes and his own fragmented memories, he retraced the ritual steps outlined in the journal. In the damp basement, by the light of a single flickering candle, he began the incantation, a plea for forgiveness and release. The air thickened, and the storm outside seemed to hold its breath. As he chanted, the walls pulsed with an eerie glow, and the whispering voices crescendoed into a maddening chorus. The spectral figure loomed behind him, its eyes reflecting an endless sorrow. In a final surge of will, Daniel confronted the phantom of his past, his voice merging with the howling wind. I am more than my mistakes. I reject this curse, this endless torment. For a fleeting moment, The silence was absolute. Then the candle sputtered out, plunging the room into darkness. In that pitch-black void, Daniel felt a shifting, a tearing of reality. The whispers transformed into a cacophony of voices, each echoing a part of his shattered identity. Chapter 10, The Unexpected End. When light finally returned, the basement was empty. The ritual circle on the floor had faded, and the oppressive presence had lifted. Yet something was amiss. Outside, the storm had abated, replaced by an eerie calm. Daniel was nowhere to be found. In the main room, the door stood ajar. Wet footprints led from the threshold to a mirror hanging on the wall. As the camera of fate panned over the reflective surface, viewers would see not a freed soul, but the tortured visage of a man forever trapped between worlds. In the mirror, Daniel's face bore the weight of every sin and every sorrow, a silent testament to the truth. The curse was not broken. Instead, it had claimed him entirely. His disappearance was no escape. It was a transformation. Daniel had become the very specter he had fought, doomed to haunt the cabin for eternity. The final shot lingered on the mirror as the sound of distant rain resumed. In that moment, a new set of wet footprints appeared, leading from the cabin into the dark woods. The cycle was destined to begin anew, waiting for the next lost soul to cross the threshold. Epilogue. The cycle continues. Whispers in the Rain is more than a story of a haunted night. It is a mirror reflecting the darkest corners of our minds. Each whisper, each drop of rain, carries the echo of forgotten sins. And as long as there are secrets buried beneath our hearts, the storm will never truly end. The haunting question remains: are you ready to listen when the rain starts its whisper? The rain keeps calling. A stormy night, a stranger on the road, a town that shouldn't exist. Chapter 1, The Road to Nowhere. The rain had been relentless for hours, hammering the windshield like desperate fingers trying to claw their way inside. Nathan gripped the steering wheel tighter, eyes squinting against the distorted glow of the headlights on the drenched road. He was miles away from civilization, driving through a nameless stretch of highway, with only the occasional flicker of lightning to remind him he wasn't completely alone in the world. His phone had lost signal over an hour ago. His GPS? Completely useless. Every turn seemed to loop him back onto the same empty road. The only thing that changed was the rain. It got heavier, colder, louder. Then he saw it. A figure standing in the middle of the road. Nathan barely had time to react before he swerved, tires screeching on the slick asphalt. His car skidded sideways, slamming into the muddy ditch. He sat there breathless, hands shaking. When he looked up again, the figure was gone, but the whispering had started. A voice carried through the rain, soft yet unmistakably close. "Help me?" Chapter 2, The Stranger. Nathan hesitated before stepping out. The rain was ice cold, soaking through his clothes instantly. He turned in circles, searching for any sign of the person he nearly hit. Then movement. A woman stood just beyond the reach of his headlights, her back to him. Her long, drenched hair clung to her skin, her thin dress sticking unnaturally to her body. "Are you okay?" Nathan called out. She didn't respond. He took a step forward, and the woman's head snapped toward him with a sickening crack, her mouth stretching into a silent scream. Nathan stumbled back, heart hammering against his ribs. But then she was gone, vanished into the sheets of rain. The whisper came again, this time right behind him. "Keep driving." Nathan didn't need to be told twice. Chapter 3, The Town That Shouldn't Exist. He drove fast, faster than was safe. But no matter how far he went, the road seemed endless. The rain blurred everything, turning the world into a washed-out nightmare. Then, through the storm, he saw a sign, "Welcome to Raven's Hollow. Population 324. Nathan frowned. There hadn't been a town marked on his map, but there it was, lights flickering in the distance like weak fireflies struggling against a storm. With no other choice, he drove toward it. The town looked abandoned. The streets were flooded, and the buildings looked aged beyond their years. A lone gas station stood on the corner, its neon sign flickering. Nathan pulled in, the dull ding of the station bell barely audible over the storm. A man sat behind the counter, unmoving. His hollow eyes followed Nathan as he entered. "You're not supposed to be here," the man said, voice raspy. Nathan hesitated. "I got lost in the storm. Almost hit someone on the road." The old man's expression didn't change. "You did hit someone." The air turned to ice. Lightning flashed, illuminating the reflection behind him in the gas station window. The wet-haired woman was standing right behind him. Chapter 4, The Curse of Raven's Hollow. Nathan spun around, but there was nothing. The old man sighed, shaking his head. "You need to leave before it's too late," he murmured. "The rain called for the lost." Nathan swallowed hard. "What does that mean?" The old man slid something across the counter, an old, water-damaged newspaper. The headline sent a chill through Nathan's spine. Town flooded in 1974. All residents lost. He stared in horror. The same town, the same streets, the same buildings, but it had drowned nearly 50 years ago. The walls of the gas station creaked. Nathan turned to the door, only to see water rising outside. The rain wasn't just falling. It was flooding the town again, trapping him inside. Then the whispering returned. Louder, more voices this time. "Don't fight it, join us." The lights flickered, and from the aisles, the drowned figures began to emerge. Chapter 5, No Escape. Nathan ran. He barely made it to his car before the water swallowed the gas station whole. The town was sinking. Buildings crumbled as waves crashed against them. Nathan slammed the car into drive, tires splashing to the rising floodwaters. But the road was gone. The entire town was being consumed. His heart pounded. He could barely see through the rain. Then, a figure in the middle of the road. The woman, her arms stretched toward him, eyes hollow, mouth moving silently. Nathan slammed the brakes, but the car hydroplaned straight into her. Only she didn't move. Instead, she opened her mouth, and from within came a horrible wet gurgle, not a scream, but a sound like water rushing into lungs. Nathan's vision went black. The road was gone. The storm had swallowed it. Ahead, an old Victorian house stood alone, its windows glowing faintly. Nathan had no choice. He stepped inside. The air was damp. The walls dripped with water, and the house knew him. Pictures lined the walls of him. Nathan as a child. Nathan on his 18th birthday. Nathan standing next to his parents. The whispers grew louder. Then he saw the final photo. A black and white newspaper clipping. His own face staring back at him. Nathan Carter, 6, lost in 1974 flood. Body never recovered. His mind snapped. A mirror stood in the corner. He turned to it and saw his reflection was already looking at him. Part 3. The Rain Calls for You. Chapter 7. The Truth You Forgot. Nathan was never lost. He had never left. He had drowned in the 1974 flood with everyone else. The town wasn't real. The road wasn't real. He had been driving in circles for 50 years. The whispers turned to screams. "Come home. Join us. It's time to stop running." Nathan felt it now. The weight of water in his lungs. The cold grasp of the storm pulling him under. The house crumbled, vanishing into the waves. And Nathan sank. Final chapter. Who's next? When he opened his eyes, the storm was gone. The town was gone. And he was on the road again, Headlights glowed in the distance. A car approached. Inside, a new driver, lost in the storm. Nathan stepped onto the road, smiling, waiting. The rain whispered again, "Keep driving." The shadows are growing, and the horrors are just beginning. If you think this was terrifying, you haven't seen anything yet. More nightmares await, lurking in the dark corners of the haunted hour. Subscribe now, before the darkness takes you too. And don't forget to turn on notifications, because the next story might just find you first. See you in the dark.